Hey there! Thanks for coming back and watching my second episode of Will's Way. If this is not your second episode watching, you should go watch episode 1 because that explains what Will's Way is and kind of what I'm wanting to do with these videos. And with that being said, let's move on to this week's topic, which is my not so favorite topic of the great American sport of football. So I'm not really a huge football person. In fact, I'm not even a huge sports person. I decided to choose being a nerd over playing sports. Not that you can't be both, but I picked nerd and academics. And kind of just shunned all sports in the process, because that's what I chose to do. The reason I want to talk about football this week is because the Super Bowl just happened, so it's kind of one of those things that people are thinking about and talking about. And so if you like the Patriots, go Patriots and go Patriots fans. If you don't like the Patriots and like the Seahawks, sorry Seahawks. I was kind of more towards Seahawks because I like Seattle, but I'm really impartial because I'm not a big sports person. Although it's really cool that Captain America's team won, because Captain America might be one of my favorite superheroes at the moment, because Chris Evans does a wonderful Captain America, I think, and that is as far as I'm going to go into nerddom at the moment. We're going to cut back to football. So I kind of got some interesting viewpoints when it comes to sports and football recently when I went on a trip with some coworkers, and my friend Timothy was playing this podcast from Radiolab where they talked about football and the origins and all that. You should go listen to it. It's really cool, and kind of hearing about where football came from and what the point of football was back in the day. That's really interesting, and I actually found that fun to listen to, even though I don't like football that much. One of the most interesting key features or key points that they made was that it was a very brutal sport when it started out, and they made a comment. They were like, these are Harvard and Yale boys that were doing this, and they were like biting and kicking and kneeing each other. And that's a completely different idea of what you think of when you think of Harvard and Yale boys now, because you don't think of brutal and that you don't think of that. So that's interesting, and it's interesting how things and times change. So towards the end of the podcast, they start kind of discussing how these days there's kind of a decline. It's not a huge decline, it's kind of like a slight decline of people involved in kids wanting to get involved in playing football and other sports. I think they said pretty much every single sport was seeing a small decline in enrollment and kids signing up for sports and playing them. And so one of the ladies she was calling all these coaches across the country. She was like, hey, so what do you think the problem is? And all the coaches kept saying one thing. And it was pretty much word for word the exact same thing. They were saying, kids don't like to lose, and they can go and they can play a video game, and if they're losing, they can restart and play again and win. Whereas if you're playing on an actual sports team, and you put in all this time and all this effort, and you go to the big game and you lose, you don't have the chance to just restart that game. You have to take that loss and move forward. And so this kind of sparked an interesting conversation with me and my coworkers after we finished the podcast. We started discussing, are video games really the cause of that? Because for me, I like video games, so I felt like that was a big jab at me and what I like. And so we started discussing it, and we started discussing the idea of not wanting to lose at things. And that makes sense. People don't like losing. Nobody is like, I want to wake up and lose today. And losing comes in all forms. So it's not going to be just, I lost a game or I lost my keys. Although losing your keys is not what we're talking about here. No, losing can come from, say, you like someone, you ask them out and they say, sorry, I'm not interested, or I don't like you, and then that's a loss. Or it can come from you applying to a college or a certain program that you really like and them saying, hey, sorry, you're not what we're looking for, and you getting rejected from that. And so those are losses, and a lot of times we don't really know how to deal with losses. But an interesting topic that was brought up was, if you play sports as a kid, so as a kid, if you play on your elementary school football team, or if you play on a young t-ball team or something like that, when you lose, you learn how to cope with losing. And these days, there's a big push to everyone's a winner and everyone gets the little you're a winner ribbon. And that's kind of cool, because I like the idea of empowering people and lifting people up. But once you get into the real world, it isn't like that. And it took me a while to kind of comprehend that, because while I wasn't in the real world yet, the idea of getting that affirmation and that everyone's a winner sounded really awesome. But once I kind of got out and got rejected from jobs, and jobs said, hey, sorry, you're not what we're looking for, I realized that by losing in elementary school and doing small losses, I was capable of dealing with larger losses, and it allowed me to deal with that easier. It still bothered me, sure, but I was able to cope with it, and I knew how to express myself, and I knew how to overcome that. And so I think that's a really interesting thing to take away from this, is that sports, even if that's not what we're into, sports give us that type of loss. And it allows us to get a smaller loss so that when we get older and we grow up, we can get bigger losses and it doesn't break us down. So this isn't really a pros and cons of sports video. It's more just a, I've kind of grown up and sports aren't that evil that I thought they were. And that's kind of interesting, because that's a perfect Will's Way example of how I'm still kind of learning and I'm still kind of finding my way. With all that being said, hopefully there is some valid point that you could latch on to and take home after this. That's the main point of all these, is that you take something away and you grow and you become better, because making these videos gives me new viewpoints and I take away things and I grow. And I hope that if you have thoughts about it, you can comment and let me know, because I would love to hear your thoughts so I can grow and become a better and find more of my way. I love you all. Don't forget to smile. See you next time when we talk about music, I think. I want to talk about music. So we'll see if that's what we actually talk about. Adios.